The job was routine. A developer out of Chicago had bought up a stretch of old US steel land on the west side of Gary and needed aerial for their pitch deck. 6 buildings, mostly shells, some with roofs half caved in. I'd flown that kind of site maybe 50 times. You go up, you do a grid, you come down, you drive home. Nobody cares. I got there around 4 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. Late September, that flat gray light you get in northwest Indiana when the wind is off the lake. The parking lot was cracked to hell with grass punching through. My truck was the only thing there. I set up on the hood. Coffee from a Speedway in Hammond, a granola bar, the Mavic in its case. The client wanted 4K, oblique passes on each face of each structure, plus an overhead orbit. I filed the sectional in my head, made sure nothing was flagged, and put the drone up. First hour was clean. I flew the perimeter buildings first, saving the big one for last. That one used to be some kind of finishing mill, I think. 4 stories, brick, all the windows on the east side blown out or missing entirely. Graffiti I couldn't read from the ground. There was a chain link fence around the whole property with the same 3 signs every 20 feet. No trespassing, private property, video surveillance. That last one was funny because there wasn't a single camera on the whole lot that I could see. I did the mill last because it took the longest. Full orbit at 40 meters, then a slow crawl down each face at 12 meters, close enough to catch the texture of the brick for the deck. The whole thing took maybe 18 minutes. Battery was still good when I brought it home. I packed up, drove back to my apartment in Merrillville, ordered a pizza, and started reviewing the footage around 8. I use a big monitor for this because clients complain if you miss anything, and the cheapest way to lose a contract is to hand over a clip with a shadow on it that turns out to be a hole in the roof. So I sit there, and I watch every frame at half speed. The mill footage was fine until the east face. I was doing the slow crawl, 2nd story, and I noticed something in the window on the 3rd floor, just at the edge of the frame for maybe 2 seconds. I paused, rewound, went frame by frame. There were people in there. I counted 3, maybe 4, standing back from the window opening, not close to it. You could see the shapes of shoulders and heads against the darker interior. One of them was taller than the others. That's about all I could tell. The resolution was there, but the light wasn't, and the drone had already moved on by the time my brain caught up. I sat back, took a bite of pizza I didn't taste. Squatters made sense. Gary has a real problem with people getting into these buildings, and the mill had a busted loading door on the north side that anyone could walk through. I'd seen mattresses and fire pits in worse places. The reason I cared was liability. If the developers team walked in there next week for a site visit and someone jumped out with a knife, that was on the survey. I was supposed to flag stuff like this in my report, so I made a call. I had another battery in the truck, and I was only 30 minutes from the site. If I went back and did a closer pass, I could get a head count, maybe a face or two, hand it to the client, and let them deal with it through the sheriff. Clean. I got back to the lot around 9:30. It was full dark by then, but that side of Gary has almost no working streetlights, so the property was black except for what little the moon gave me. I didn't want to spook anyone with headlights, so I killed the truck 100 yards down the access road and walked the last stretch with the drone case. Same hood spot. Switched to the thermal payload I keep for infrastructure jobs. Put it up. The Mavic is quiet. From 20 meters up you can't hear it unless it's dead still and you already know to listen. I brought it in slow, no strobes, running just the IR beacon that only reads on my controller. Ceiling of about 30 meters. I edged toward the mill from the south so the sound wouldn't carry into the open windows on the east. I got to the 3rd floor window. Same one. There were 7 of them. Not 4. Not the 3 or 4 I'd seen in the daylight pass. 7 distinct thermal signatures standing in a rough half circle inside the room, back from the opening. Warm shapes. Roughly human, roughly adult. I switched to the visible camera and the resolution went to hell because of the dark, but I could still make out shoulders and the pale ovals of faces. They were all turned toward the drone. Every single one of them. I want to be clear about this because I've thought about it a lot since. The Mavic at that height is a black dot against a black sky. It doesn't blink. It doesn't hum loud enough to hear over the wind coming off the mill stacks. There was no reason for any of those people to know it was there, let alone all of them, let alone facing the exact spot in the air where it was hovering. I did the thing you do. I moved the drone, slid it about 8 meters to the left, keeping the same altitude, kept the camera on the window. They tracked it, not fast, not like a jerk. All 7 heads rotated together, smoothly, the way a crowd at a tennis match follows the ball. They stopped when the drone stopped. They kept looking. My hands were on the sticks and I noticed my thumbs were cold. That's the detail I remember most clearly. My thumbs were cold and the rest of me was fine. I pulled back another 10 meters. Higher too. 40 meters up, maybe 45. Just wanted a wider frame. When I reframed the shot and looked again, there were 9. 2 more had come from somewhere behind the group. Same half circle, same posture. All facing up and out toward the drone. I want to say I did something smart. I didn't. I brought the drone back at whatever speed the controller would give me, sideways over the fence, and landed it on the gravel next to the truck instead of the launch pad because I was rushing. I remember the little skid it made when it touched down. I remember picking it up and the props were warm on my palm. I did not look back at the mill, not once. I threw the case in the passenger seat and drove out of that lot with the headlights off until I was on 12, and I didn't put them on until a semi behind me flashed his brights. I did not stop at the speedway on the way home. That night, I sat at my desk and thought about what I was going to send the client. Contract said all raw footage, unedited, delivered within 72 hours. I opened the project folder and I looked at the two files, the daylight mill pass, the thermal pass. I trimmed them both. The daylight one, I cut the 2 seconds, where you could see figures in the window. The thermal one, I didn't send at all. I told the client I hadn't gotten to it because of a battery issue, and I refunded the thermal line item on the invoice. He didn't push back. $240 was nothing to him. The last thing I did before I went to bed was copy the thermal file to a separate drive so I could look at it again. I don't know why. Some part of me wanted to prove to myself I'd seen what I'd seen, that the number really was 7 and then 9, that they really had all turned. I watched it twice that night. First time, I counted 7. Second time, I counted 9, which matched what I remembered. The third time I watched it was 2 days later, on a Friday, sitting in my kitchen with the lights on and a beer I wasn't drinking. I counted 10. I told myself I'd missed one. The frame was dark, the signatures blurred together at the edges of the half circle. Easy to lose one in a stack. I watched it a fourth time the same night, slower, with the playback stepped down to a quarter speed. 11. I sat there and I counted them again from the left. 1, 2, 3, all the way across. 11 distinct shapes, and the outermost one on the right was smaller than the others. Not small like a child, small like someone hunched. I don't know if that one had been there the whole time and I'd missed it 4 viewings in a row. That's the reasonable answer, and I try to hold on to it. I deleted the file that night. The drive too, the whole external. I wiped it and dropped it in a Goodwill donation bin the next morning because I didn't want it in my apartment. The developer got his footage. The mill got knocked down that winter. I saw it in a trade newsletter. I never heard anything about squatters or bodies or anyone in the demolition crew finding something they didn't want to find. Maybe there was nothing to find by then. Maybe there never was. I still fly. I don't take jobs in Gary anymore. That's a personal thing, not a professional one, and I'd have a hard time explaining it to anyone who asked. Nobody asks. The only thing I catch myself doing, once in a while, is standing at the launch pad before a flight and looking up at the drone before I put it in the air. Just checking whether anything is looking back. I probably shouldn't have watched it the second time. That's the part I keep coming back to. 7 was a number I could have lived with. 9 I could have made a story out of, groups of people, a shift change, whatever. 11 with the hunched one on the end is a number I don't have anywhere to put, so I don't put it anywhere. I just leave it where it is. It started as a lightning fire off a Forest Service road above the Feather River, second week of July 2021. Nothing dramatic at first. Maybe 6 acres when we rolled in, spotty ground cover, mostly ponderosa and manzanita on a south-facing slope. I've been on wildland engines for 11 summers. You get a feel for these ones early. The way the smoke column leans, how thick the underbrush is, whether the wind is going to sit or turn. This one had a bad feel almost right away, but nothing you could point to. Just old-timer instinct. They put me and 2 other guys on recon ahead of the line. Basic stuff. Walk the drainage, mark a scratch line the dozers could follow, radio back on fuel loads and any hazards. My partners split off west along a ridge, and I took the low route down toward a saddle, where the map showed an old logging spur. The heat was already stacking. That dry, papery heat you get in the Sierra in July, where the pine needles crunch like cornflakes under your boots, and every breath tastes a little like burnt sugar. Smoke was pushing south, so I was working into a clean pocket of air for the moment, but the column behind me was building. I could hear it from a mile off. Wildfire has this sound people always compare to a freight train, and yeah, it's kind of that, but closer to a river, a big river you can't see. I came down through a stand of dead firs, tripped on a root, and caught myself against a stump, and when I stood up he was there. Just a guy, old, maybe 75, maybe older, standing in the middle of the trail with his back to me, facing the direction the fire was coming from. He had a canvas jacket on, wrong for the weather, and a pair of jeans that looked like they'd been washed about 1,000 times. No pack, no water bottle, no hat, just standing there, hands at his sides, watching the ridge where the smoke was starting to punch up over the trees. For a second I thought he was a hunter, or a hiker who'd gotten turned around. It happens. People wander off from campgrounds and don't understand what a fire like this can do until they're inside it. I keyed my radio to call it in, but before I hit the button I called out to him. "Sir, hey, sir." He didn't move. You need to come with me, right now. There's fire coming up that drainage, and it's going to move fast when the afternoon wind hits. Nothing. Not a flinch. He kept looking at the smoke like a guy watching a slow parade. I walked closer. My boots made a lot of noise on the gravel and dry needles. I remember thinking that even a deaf person would have felt the vibration by now. When I got about 10 feet from him, I could see the back of his neck was sunburned in patches, and his hair was that thin, dry white hair old men get, going every direction because nobody had bothered to comb it. Sir, I'm with the Forest Service. You need to move. We're going to walk together. Back up that way, okay? He turned around. I want to be clear about this part because I've gone over it a lot. He didn't turn fast. He didn't turn slow. He just turned like a person who'd finally heard someone talking to him. His face was a normal old man's face, weather-lined, gray stubble, blue eyes, the pale kind that go almost colorless in that age. He looked at me for maybe 2 seconds, not scared, not confused, not relieved that somebody had come to get him. Then he said, "Not this one." I said, "What?" He said, "The next one." That was it. He said it plain, the way you'd tell a waiter you didn't want dessert. Then he stepped past me, off the trail, and started walking uphill at an angle that would take him away from the fire and away from the road both. Just walking. I stood there for probably longer than I should have. My brain was trying to sort what he'd said into something a normal person would say, and it wasn't landing. I thought maybe he was senile, maybe he'd been sundowning or having a stroke. I turned around to go after him, and he was already 50 yards up through the trees, moving pretty good for an old guy. And I remember thinking a man who can walk uphill like that isn't having a medical event. I keyed the radio, told my crew boss I had a civilian in the fire area, described the direction he was heading, gave him coordinates off my GPS. He asked if I could catch up and bring him out. I said I could try, but I wasn't going to lose the light chasing him uphill with the fire coming. We spent about 20 minutes trying to raise him with the horn on one of the engines that had bumped up to our position. Nothing. By then, the wind had done what wind does in those canyons in the afternoon, and the fire was moving. I had to make a call. I called it. Evacuation, everybody off that flank. We pulled back to a safer anchor point on the road above. That fire ran hard for 2 days, and then we caught it at a little under 300 acres. Solid work by the hand crews. Nobody hurt. The old man never turned up, alive or otherwise. I filed a report. Search and rescue did a couple of passes with a helicopter once the smoke thinned out. No body, no camp, no vehicle at any of the trailheads we could tie to him. I told my crew boss about what he said. He wrote it down, but you could tell he wasn't sure what to do with it. Neither was I. We got demobbed. I went home for 4 days, slept mostly, drank a lot of water, sat on my porch and watched my neighbor's kid ride a bike back and forth. Regular stuff. But I kept turning that phrase over. Not this one. The next one. Like the guy was answering a question I hadn't asked. 3 weeks later, I was back in the same district. Different fire. Started about 11 miles from where I met him. Same kind of country, similar fuel. Dry lightning again, or maybe a downed line. They went back and forth on the cause for a while. I'd been on the ground about 6 hours when I realized where I was in relation to the July fire. You could still see the black on the ridges to the north. That one didn't stay small. It ran. It ran through the first night and kept running. By the third day, it was pushing 40,000 acres. By the end of the week, it was in the news. You probably heard about it, or one like it. That summer had a bunch of them stacked on top of each other. We lost structures. We lost a lot of country. Nobody on our crew got killed, but a guy from another team broke his back when a snag came down on his buggy. He walked again eventually. Took him a while. Somewhere in the middle of that, maybe day 5, I was sitting on a tailgate eating a cold burrito, and I said out loud, to nobody, the next one. One of the Sawyers heard me and asked what I meant. I told him it was nothing, just something an old guy had said to me a few weeks back. I gave the description around, quietly, over the rest of that season. Guys on other crews, dispatchers I knew, a couple of the county sheriffs who worked the evac zones, canvas jacket, thin white hair, 70s, blue eyes, sunburned neck. Nobody recognized him. Nobody had picked anybody up out of that country. There was no missing person report that matched. There was no obituary I could find. A ranger I trust said she'd ask around with the folks who lived up in the little pockets of private land in that district. She got back to me a month later. Nobody knew him. I've thought about it a lot of ways. Option 1, he was a guy having some kind of episode. Wandered out of a family cabin nobody reported him missing from. Said something that didn't mean anything. Wandered back. Died in his sleep 6 months later in a town I'll never hear of. His next one was just noise coming out of a broken radio. Option 2, he knew the country. Some old logger or trapper who'd read weather and fuels his whole life could feel a bigger burn coming the way farmers feel rain. He was telling me what he saw without explaining it, because at his age, he didn't feel like explaining. Option 3 is the one I don't like. I'm not a superstitious guy. I don't tell this story around a fire because it isn't that kind of story. It isn't scary in the moment. In the moment, it was just a weird thing that happened on a bad shift. What sits wrong with me is that he was calm. He wasn't watching that fire like a man in danger. He was watching it like a man watching somebody else's problem. And he was right. I still work fire. I still walk drainages ahead of the line. Every so often, when I come around a bend and there's a shape standing off the trail that turns out to be a stump or a shadow, I feel my hand go to the radio before my brain catches up. It's habit now. I never saw him again. I don't think I will. But every time we catch a small one, the first thing I feel isn't relief. It's, okay, not this one. And then I wait to see what the next one does. The first night I heard the footsteps, I was so sure it was a deer that I almost rolled back over and went to sleep. This was August 2022, second week of the month, Olympic National Park on the Washington side. I'd driven up from Portland by myself, mostly to be off my phone for a while. My plan was 5 nights of dispersed camping in one of the quieter sectors on the west side, off a spur road you can only find if you already know it's there. No campground, no ranger station within earshot, no other cars. Just me, a green MSR tent, a bear canister, and about a mile of trail between my spot and the fire road. I got to the site around 4 on a Tuesday, set up the tent under 2 big western hemlocks, ate a foil pouch of Indian food off my stove, watched the light go orange and then purple through the trees. There's a specific smell out there that people who haven't been don't believe. Wet cedar, moss, something almost sweet underneath. I remember thinking, this is exactly what I paid for. I was in the tent by 10, reading on my Kindle with a Petzl headlamp until my eyes got heavy, zipped up around 11. The footsteps started a little before midnight. You know how a deer moves through duff. It's not quiet exactly, but it's uneven. 2 steps, pause, 1 step, pause, then a rush of 4 or 5 in a row. It sounds nervous because it is nervous. What I was hearing was not that. The pace was even. Left, right, right. Slow, but with purpose. The way a person walks when they don't want to trip on a route but aren't in a hurry either. I froze. Not dramatically, just the reflex you have when you're trying to figure out what a sound is. The steps came around the back of the tent. Then the side, then the front, then the other side. Somebody, or something walking on 2 legs, was making a full circle around me at maybe 6 feet out. It went around twice. Then it stopped at what I'm pretty sure was the vestibule. My tent is small, the door faces east, and I could hear the shift of weight even standing still. A boot or a soft shoe pressing into the pine litter and releasing. Just standing there. I did not move, did not turn on the headlamp, did not say hello. Something in me, and I've thought about this a lot since, understood right away that saying anything would be worse than not saying anything. After maybe 2 minutes, the steps started again. Same pace. Not running, walking away, north into heavier trees. Then nothing. I lay awake until the sky started to gray. My first real thought, when I could think in sentences again, was that a hiker had gotten disoriented and stumbled onto my camp. My second thought was that a disoriented hiker does not do laps. In the morning, I made coffee on my little stove and walked the perimeter with the cup in my hand, feeling stupid. There was no clear boot print anywhere. The duff out there is springy and thick, and unless someone stomps, you get maybe a scuff. I found a couple of scuffs, but I couldn't swear they weren't mine from setting up. The forest looked exactly the way it looked the day before. Sunlight and bars through the canopy, a varied thrush somewhere doing that mechanical single note. I told myself it was probably a bear that had gotten up on its back legs for a second, and that my brain, sleepy and alone, had turned it into a person. I did not fully believe that, but I liked believing it enough to stay another night. The second night, I sat up until 11:45 reading with my back against a log, then got in the tent. This time I kept the headlamp in my hand under the sleeping bag, not on my forehead. I don't know exactly why, I just wanted to be able to click it on without moving my arms. The footsteps came at 12:04. I know because I looked at my watch when I first heard the crunch. Same pattern, around the back, around the side, around the front. This time it circled 3 times, not 2. On the third pass, it slowed down between the vestibule and the tree where I'd hung my dry bag with trash in it, sealed inside the canister, but the bag was on top. I heard fabric brushing against fabric. Somebody was touching the bag. Then the steps came back around and stopped at the door. I could hear breathing, not heavy, not close, but present. The kind of breath you hear from another person in a quiet room when you're both pretending to sleep. Maybe 4 feet from my face through nylon. He, and by then I was thinking of it as a he, stood there longer than the night before, long enough that my calf started to cramp because I was holding it too still, long enough that I started running through what I had in the tent that could pass as a weapon, a trekking pole with a broken tip folded next to me. a pocket knife on the little mesh shelf overhead, my headlamp on high. Then he walked away, same direction, north. I did not sleep. When it got light enough to see, I unzipped the door as slowly as I could and looked out. My dry bag was on the ground next to the canister, not where I'd left it. The zipper had been opened halfway. Nothing was taken. Even the empty foil pouch from my dinner the first night was still inside. I packed up half my stuff. Really, I did. I had my sleeping bag stuffed and my stove broken down. And then I sat on a log and drank coffee and talked myself into staying one more night, because I'd driven 6 hours to be there and I couldn't stand the idea of getting spooked out of my own trip by an animal or a lost hiker or whatever it was. That is the sentence I keep coming back to. I couldn't stand the idea of getting spooked. I want to reach through time and slap myself. The third night, I did something that in hindsight was smart and dumb at the same time. I moved the tent about 30 feet into a small clearing where I'd have a clean line of sight through the door if I opened it fast. I left the dry bag out on purpose, empty except for a granola wrapper, as a kind of tripwire. I put the knife open by my hip. I set the headlamp to its brightest setting and held it in my right hand pointed at the zipper, and I stayed awake. 12:11. The steps came. The pattern was different this time. He didn't circle first. He walked straight to where the tent had been the night before, stopped, stood there for maybe 30 seconds. Then he walked, slowly, over to the new spot. He didn't circle the new tent either. He came right up to the door. I heard the dry bag being picked up, a rustle, the crinkle of the wrapper inside, a long pause, then the bag being set back down gently. He was 2 feet from the zipper. I could smell him. Wood smoke, but old, like a jacket that has been near a lot of fires. And underneath that, sweat and something sour I don't want to name. I did not open the tent. I don't know why. I had my thumb on the switch, and I just could not make it move. Something about the fact that he had gone to the old spot first and then found the new one made me understand that whatever this was, it was not a mistake or a wander. He had been watching. He knew where I'd been. He wanted me to know he knew. He stood at the door for maybe a minute. Then he walked away, north again, at the same even pace. I got out of the park the next day, but not before the fourth night. I know how that sounds. Here is the honest reason. My car was at the trailhead a mile down, and the trail out went through the same stretch of forest he had been walking into every night for 3 nights. Leaving in the dark on foot felt worse than staying. Leaving at dawn meant one more night in the tent. So the fourth night I sat inside fully dressed with my boots on, headlamp in my right hand, knife in my left, sleeping bag over my legs like a blanket. I did not read, I did not close my eyes. I watched the door. 12:09, footsteps. He circled once, fast, almost impatient, came to the door, stopped. I counted to 3, put my thumb on the zipper, and pulled it up in one motion while clicking the headlamp on with the same hand. The beam caught his back. He was already moving. A man, maybe 40, maybe 50, wearing a dark green jacket that looked army surplus and a knit cap. Tall, thin. He didn't turn around. He didn't run either, not really. He walked, fast, into the trees, and inside of 5 seconds, the beam couldn't find him anymore. Just trunks and ferns and the shape of where he had been. I sat in the door of the tent with my legs shaking so hard the light was jumping around until it got gray enough to hike. I found a ranger at the little station on the road out. Older guy, gray mustache. I told him the whole thing. 4 nights, the circling, the dry bag, the man in the green jacket walking north. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he nodded once, slow, and said, "Yeah, we've had reports." I asked what that meant. "There's a guy, we think just one, living in that sector. Not on any permit. Been maybe a year, maybe longer. Doesn't bother people exactly. Comes into camps at night, looks at what's out. We think he's mostly checking food. Never taken anything as far as we can tell. Never been violent." I asked why nobody had caught him. He shrugged. Big park. He said they'd bump patrols in that sector for the rest of the month. He suggested I move to one of the developed campgrounds if I wanted to stay. I did move to a place with numbered sites and a host and a bathroom with a light on all night, and I slept 12 hours. I still go out. I don't camp alone in Olympic anymore. Thanks for joining me for another batch of creepy 4chan stories. Let me know in the comments which one stood out to you the most. And if you haven't already, go watch some of the other videos on the channel. See you soon. Bye.